place, like I have speed bumps on my street, or I hate speed bumps on my street. I want a traffic circle on that incredibly wide stretch of Mountain Avenue, where people go screaming by at 60 miles an hour in front of houses with dogs and kids and cats and yet $10 million, to design and build these things. I hope this is the beginning of a serious discussion. Over the last 75 years, closer to 100, we have built our cities around cars, and Pasadena is no exception. It has been a tremendous boon to those of us who can afford a car and are young enough, but not too old, or old enough, but not too old to drive. It allows us to get where we want to go, when we want to go, unlike the bus, which in Pasadena means often waiting at a terrible stop for a long time, and not necessarily getting where you want to go. So how do we balance our desire for safety, our need to get around, the importance of living together even when we disagree, and figuring out how to pay for paving our streets, maintaining our streets, and making our streets safer and more livable? So we're going to talk tonight about that. We're not going to finish the conversation tonight, but I hope we'll have that conversation, the beginning of that conversation, in which people who sometimes vehemently disagree will have an opportunity to hear and listen to each other and look for common ground. That's my hope tonight, and I hope you join me in that spirit. We're going to start out with a discussion of the most significant new project on the horizon, which is a project called Greenways. And our Director of Transportation, Joaquin Siquez, is going to share a little preview of what that looks like. Already, it is controversial. How many of you remember the Orange Grove Road Diet controversy? There were signs in people's front lawns. There were angry people at public hearings. There were petitions. There were angry editorials. There was lots of, and in the end, nothing changed. Orange Grove still is kind of a speedway, and we are where we are. I'm hoping to avoid that kind of fiasco with Greenways. There is no design yet for Greenways, but let me tell you just briefly, because Joaquin will go into more depth, what the purpose is. And they predate me, not my idea, but I am certainly sympathetic to the idea, and here's why. When the freeway was put in Pasadena, of course, we all know the arterials, north-south. There's Los Robles, there's Lake, there's Hill, there's Allen, right? We know those, the traditional arterials. But when Caltrans built the 210, they built bridges in between each of them. And that turned residential streets, which were the same as Chester or Oxford or all of the other north-south streets that are basically residential streets. They turned Wilson, Sierra Bonita, Craig, and I'm missing one, El Molino, into little freeways. Because in order to get people north-south, they would avoid Hill or Allen or Lake, because oftentimes there was a lot of traffic there. So they cut through what had been residential neighborhoods and suddenly were transformed. Well, the idea is to slow traffic on those 4 streets. How do you do it? Well, there's a lot of different possibilities. Mr. Siquez is going to share some of those ideas. And we're going to try to do this in a collaborative way. In the end, it will be difficult to come to consensus, because as I've learned over 40 years of public service, everyone is a traffic engineer. Some people like stop signs. Some people know that they roll them. Some people want traffic lights, and some people are frustrated that they have to sit at a red light when there are no cars going the other way. Some people love bike lanes. Some people curse at them. And so finding common ground will be a challenge. But I hope that we can do that. I hope we can find a way to slow traffic on these streets for two reasons. One, the people who live on those streets really don't deserve to live on freeway. And number two, pedestrians and cyclists, kids playing ball in the front yard deserve to have a street where they're safe. So, we also have two other panelists. My appointee to the Transportation Commission, there's a Transportation Advisory Commission, and I think it's 9 folks on that commission. 7, excuse me, so just one for each district.
The mayor and the you were right.
Okay, I was right, nine members. Each one of the districts gets appointed one, and Becky Hartung is my appointee to District 2, relatively new. Blair Miller has been involved for a long time. She has been co-chair of the Complete Streets Coalition. This is a group of folks who have advocated for years for safety for bicyclists and pedestrians throughout the city. I invited a group who has a different perspective called Keep Testing and Moving, that was born out of the road diet. They were the folks who opposed the road diet. They chose not to attend tonight. And I'm sorry for that, because I believe in having all views expressed. So if you share that viewpoint, I'm sorry there will be no one on the panel who necessarily has that viewpoint, but we're open to listening to all voices tonight. So Joaquin, I think you want to take us through the greenways, and let's start with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Cole. I think I'm going to hold this so that everybody can hear me, and that way I'm not leaning too far over. Again, Joaquin Sigas, Director of Transportation for the city of Pasadena. Next slide. And really, we're here to talk about safety. I'll be talking about the Greenways project, but a lot of what we do in transportation, really most of what we do in transportation, focuses on safety, safety of the users of the roadway network, be it motorists in their vehicles, be it bicyclists, pedestrians. We really are focused on improving the system to make it as safe as possible, and balancing that with the needs of mobility to make sure that we provide access throughout the network. And we follow the safe system approach, which is something that was developed through a Federal Highway Administration framework to really manage the roadways and safety based on two things. One is on the outside of the circle, the image that you see on the screen is the 6 principles of safe system approach. And I'll read them out because they're a little bit small on the screen. And I'll start with the fact that humans make mistakes. You know, as I tell my son, everybody has to make choices in life, and sometimes you make bad choices. So it's the same with motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists. We're all humans and we make mistakes. In addition to that, humans are vulnerable as people that are either in a vehicle or on the street. We're all vulnerable to impacts, and the most vulnerable are pedestrians and bicyclists because they don't have that shell around them that the vehicle provides. Third principle is that responsibility is shared. So it's not just the it's all the users of the roadway system. It's pedestrians and motorists, the city. We all have a shared responsibility in the safety of the system. Safety is proactive. We need to be looking ahead to enhance safety and not just looking at where incidents have occurred. But redundancy is crucial in this because of the fact that humans make mistakes. And lastly, that death and serious injury is unacceptable. So for us in the transportation department, the 5 elements that are in the middle of the safe system approach by there, we really focus on the safe roads and the safe speeds as the 2 main components really for this project, in the Greenways project, but we are involved with other departments and many of the other aspects of the safe system approach. Next. So what is a greenway? A greenway is really a neighborhood streets that is meant to really operate slowly and have moderate to low vehicle speeds. And it's really intended to make, these projects are really intended to make safety better or enhance safety for everybody, not just bicyclists or pedestrians, but also motorists as you come out of your driveway, as you're trying to get in and out of your home. And we're really trying to enhance the safety of the entire network. Next slide. And for us, this project of passing these north-south greenways really looks at how do we connect the north and south of the freeway, as Councilmember Cole had noted, on streets that have low volumes, on streets that are mostly residential in nature, and for the most part are traveling at a pretty fast speed. But we want to make them safer, provide more comfort for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. So this map that you see here is the existing bicycle network. The dark blue lines are existing bike lanes. The yellow lines are what we call our roseways, which are kind of more just bicycle friendly routes. And the greenways connects these, next slide please, these facilities through 4 north-south corridors. And these 4 north-south corridors are Amelino, Wilson, Sierra Bonita, and Craig. And they were chosen because they are streets that cross the freeway, but they don't have freeway on or off ramps. Because if you ever walked across the freeway on and off ramp, you know how difficult it is with vehicles getting on or off the freeway to cross those locations. So that's why these 4 streets were selected of the about 25 streets that cross the freeway. These are the 4 that don't have vehicle on or off ramps, and again have low volumes and allow us to look at potential safety enhancements along these corridors. Next slide. So what are some of the potential treatments? And I'll take a step back just to note that nothing has been set in stone. This project, this Greenways project, is really at stage now where we will do a lot of community outreach to see what residents along these streets really want to see along these greenways. How can we improve safety for all roadway users? And these are some potential treatments. So we start with something like the speed humps, which recently the city council through council action has included greenways as a street type that's eligible for speed humps. So it still has to meet certain criteria, but in the past, because they weren't local streets, basically because they crossed the freeway and treated as collectors, they were not eligible for speed humps, but now they are if they meet the other criteria. So that's one potential treatment along these corridors. Another is the chicane. The chicane is the image on the right. And basically what it is, it's shifting the parking from one side of the street to the other. All 4 of these greenways are narrow streets. They're 1 lane in each direction and have parking typically on one side. I think one street may have parking on both sides, but I believe all 4 of them just have parking on one side. So we're not looking at eliminating parking. We're not looking at adding bike lanes on these facilities or taking away travel lanes. That's not something we could do because it's only a single lane. What we're doing is, what we're looking at is how to reduce the speeds on these corridors. And one option is chicaning the street so that the vehicular traffic has to shift back and forth as the parking shifts back and forth, so that we're eliminating kind of this thoroughfare, kind of straight shot down the street. Next slide. Other possible treatments include intersection improvements, such as curb extensions. These are locations where we can shorten the crossings for pedestrians and make pedestrians more visible on the approach, but they also help reduce speeds of vehicles because the roadway narrows where we have curb extensions. Next slide. Another possible treatment is the installation of a median along some of these roadways. Something like this, because it's a 2-lane roadway, would require the removal of maybe 2 to 4 parking spaces right where the median is. But it's just another potential treatment to again slow down traffic on these streets so that we can create a safe environment for all roadway users. Next slide. So the way this process works is in 2015, there was the Bicycle Transportation Action Plan, and it identified these 4 north-south greenways, as well as a number of other bicycle projects throughout the city, including the work that's been done on Cordova, it's on Union Street. And these 4 north-south greenways, while they were identified in the plan, had a list of potential treatments. You'll see in this old plan that there's kind of a toolbox of treatment. Some of them have been proposed for certain corridors, but it was really just a vision of what could be done. What we're doing now is taking the next step and going through this process of getting community feedback on all four of these corridors, and we'll talk about that in a little bit to see what we can try out. And there's various options. So what we have in this project is we do have some funding for what's called a quick build. And these are basically paint and plastic treatments. So things that are low cost, that we can put out in the street, try them out, see if the residents like them. If they don't, we remove them. If they do, maybe we move into the next phase, which is the construction of a concrete improvement like the image on the right, where we're building really permanent types of treatments. This case here is a traffic diverter, which just allows bicyclists through, but not motorists. And again, we wouldn't go through and implement something like that without having feedback of the community that lives up and down that street to really see how we can balance the need for safety and the need for access. And we do have these types of traffic diverters in the city. There's one on Franklin Orange Grove, one in Washington. So it's locations where we allow bikes through, but not motor vehicles for that first block. Next slide. So I have some just examples of built treatments. This one here shows, curb extensions that are done with paint and those larger raised pavement markers. We could also include the plastic bollards that you've seen throughout the city, again, as temporary treatments to try out the improvement and see if it's something that the residents on this corridor would like to see as a permanent improvement before we go through the design phase to actually build it or design it out of a concrete extension. Next slide. This is another similar temporary improvement of a traffic circle. So we test out circles at various intersections. Most of these streets are very narrow, so traffic circles may not be a solution that works along these four corridors, but it is something that's in the toolbox. Councilmember Cole had mentioned the intersection of Dillon and Topeka. That's an intersection where the speeds were going over 42, about 41, 42 miles an hour was the 85% of speed. So the speed along that corridor north-south after the installation of the traffic circle that had reduced down to 31. So, and it's not right at the intersection. You're going to have to go at about 15 miles an hour to get around that. But these are the approaches to it. So the blocks leading up to it, where we're really seeing the implementation of these types of treatments that reduce the speeds along those corridors. Next slide. And lastly, this is just an image of a temporary traffic diverter where something can be done to test out the enhancement and see if it's too much of an impact. If people don't like it, because you may have to go around the block, if you live on that first block to access your home. It's something that can be tested. It's something that we could study the traffic diversion, see if traffic is moving to other minor streets, or if they're going on the major streets, which is what's intended. And then after going through this process, you can either remove it or go to the next step of the installation. Next slide. So we've actually awarded 2 contracts that are for the Greenways project. The first is a design contract, and it's broken up into 2 phases. The first phase is the outreach, data collection, conceptual design, and the preliminary engineering of these quick build demonstration projects. So this is first phase. This is where we're going to be getting a lot of community feedback, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, to determine along these corridors what potential treatments could be installed. Second phase, which is the optional phase, is the final design. So once we get to a point where we have consensus along the streets and we think we have improvements that could really make a difference, then we'll go into that design phase so that we'll construct the final build. And the interesting thing about this project, it is fully funded through construction.
And Joaquin, can you clarify where that funding comes from?
The funding comes from 2 sources. For the actual final construction, it comes through Measure R Mobility Improvement Projects funding. When the 710 project was not constructed, the tunnel between the interchange of the 134-210 and Alhambra, that section of freeway wasn't constructed. There was money set aside through the Measure R sales tax for projects to improve mobility along these corridors. That allowed us to go after funding that was multimodal, so not just particular improvements on north-south corridors, but in this case, bicycle improvements as a bicycle type project for these 4 north-south corridors. And it's fully funded through that, so there is no local funds going into it. It's all from this regional metro funding, sales tax funding. There's another component of funding, which is the Craig Avenue Quick Build. So we're very active in pursuing grants for safety for a number of projects. And on Craig Avenue, there's a development on Craig and Walnut, which is an affordable housing development. We pursued some funding to dry out these safety enhancements along Craig is affordable housing sustainable community grant. So that's the second component of funding for this Greenways scope of work. Next one. And the outreach piece is going to be pretty intensive. So we have 4 corridors. We'll be breaking up the outreach by corridor. And we'll be identifying first a community advisory committee. So we'll be working with the council members, the mayor, we'll have a member from the Accessibility and Disability Commission, and 2 members from community-based organizations. And in the past, for this group, it's been a member from Keep Pasadena Moving and a member from Pasadena Streets Coalition, really to be able to have a good diverse set of views on the projects and the programs which may be implemented. We anticipated having up to 20 community meetings to target each corridor, 12 coordination meetings with both internal and external departments, and 10 additional stakeholder meetings throughout this process. So we anticipate having a lot of meetings. We have a website that I'll actually, it's good time. That you can get to through a Bitly site or just through our transportation website, which has a lot more information and a lot of, we have a list of frequently asked questions about the project. And you can be added to our mailing list so that we can send you things electronically, but we'll also be sending out mailers. So you'll be getting things in the mail if you live on these corridors or on streets adjacent to these corridors, so that you can provide your feedback regarding the project. And next slide. Sorry, that's the website. There. One other thing to note is the Citizen Service Center, sorry, the City Service Center phone number there is 744-7311. If you have any concerns about speeding on your street, safety, parking, really anything that we manage in transportation, feel free to call that number or use the app on the website or the app on your phone. Parking complaints go directly to our parking dispatch. So if there's somebody blocking your driveway or red, or you have another concern, our parking enforcement gets that directly to the app. And if it's something that we need to investigate through the engineering and operations group, then we'll be able to get that from the CSC, and then we open up traffic investigations based on this.
So we are going to come back and talk about the greenways and your role in it. But I want to take a step back, as we said at the outset, to thinking citywide and thinking holistically. What are we really trying to do? Because we can get lost in the details of, I hate this, or I love that, or I want it on my street, but I don't want it on your street, or, we'll come back to that because that's important ultimately. But we're going to start our conversation tonight talking about the city as a whole. In 1992, so more than 30 years ago, the city adopted a completely new general plan for its future. And one of the 7 principles that were voted on even before the plan was finalized was that Pasadena would be a city where you could circulate without a car. And that didn't mean that we were going to come and collect your car keys. What that meant is that if you were too old to drive, or too young to drive, or couldn't afford a car, or for health reasons, environmental reasons, just your own choice, you'd prefer to walk to Seeds Bakery or to Lavender and Honey, or you prefer to get to where you like to go for your kids, instead of dropping them off in a long line of cars, that they feel safe biking. 30 years later, we're not a city where you can safely circulate without a car in most of the city. In most of the city, it's unpleasant to wait for public transit at a bus stop where you might have to wait 30 minutes. In most of the city, speeding traffic makes it difficult to cross our major streets. And so, in one question is, do we want to be the city that puts cars first, second, and third? Or do we want to be a city where people do have choices to be able to safely walk and bike to get around the city and use public transit? That's a core question. So I'm going to start with you, Blair. You've been through some of these wars and you've heard people express their frustration. They got to get to work. They're not going to walk to the grocery store and bring home free bags, you know, carrying. And the city keeps spending all this money to screw up the streets and make it difficult to drive around. How do you respond to that blowback to the way in which the city's operated in trying to find the balance?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think
And close to the mic so everyone can hear.
that better. Thanks. Thanks for asking. I mean, these are, it is important that we recognize, and Councilmember Coles started out acknowledging that most of us are drivers, and some of us would like to have the opportunity to get around without a car. And then some of us can't drive, that they're older or younger, or disabled, or decide not to. And so the point is not to have a war on cars in Pasadena. The point is to enable people to have options and opportunities safely. One of the things we've learned from studying these issues is that streets that are safer for pedestrians and bicyclists are also safer for drivers. Pasadena is unsafe. Our streets are unsafe, period, for everybody.
We have 700 injury collisions a year. 700.
And when we are compared with cities of our size, we don't come out well. We consistently rank very high on a list that you do not want to rank high on, which is published by the state, of comparing cities of our size with injuries and fatalities. And we very consistently rank in the top 5 on one or more of the categories. So this is not great. But it's hard for folks who haven't had a chance to experience the alternatives or haven't needed to, it naturally feels very threatening because it feels like we're trying to take something away. When actually I think what the goal is to just add opportunities. I will say that there's also been a bit of a change, I think, in people's conception of what's possible without a car with the introduction of electric bikes. So I ride an electric bike, a lot of other folks do. And that really does open up a lot of possibilities for folks who aren't necessarily super fit to actually go to the grocery store, get 3 bags of groceries and ride them home.
Becky, you're now a decision maker, at least in an advisor role in the city council. And how do you react to the Keep Pasadena Moving arguments that we should just leave well enough alone? And not that very many people ride bikes anyway. How do you react to that, Becky?
I think when I sat on this panel before, I didn't mention it, it was during the Bike Month panel. But something that Rick and I have in common is that we are both lecturers at Pepperdine University. And I am not currently teaching there. The last time I taught there was in October of 2023. and I was filling in for someone on maternity leave. And my first day teaching, I dismissed my class early. I teach public speaking, and I drove home. And my husband would tell you that the weeks leading up to this class, I was terrified to drive either the Canyon home in the evening or PCH. And I called him after I let my class out and I said, gosh, I just don't like know what road to take. I'll just take PCH. I go down PCH, get home safely. And then I opened Twitter that night and I find out that 15 minutes before or after I crossed the intersection around the McDonald's area, 4 Pepperdine students were killed at that on PCH. And while they were not my students, they were in a sorority with former students of mine. And as I said, I taught public speaking and we used to give a eulogy, and I watched on the news some of my former students eulogize their friends, and I will never teach a eulogy class again for that reason. It's just too difficult. I've also had a student later that year die at a different intersection after someone ran a red light and hit him. And I know I share this not as a example of something that has happened in Pasadena, but I think is really important for you as you're here with us to know where my attitude and where a lot of my advocacy has come from. For me, never again. Never again will I allow students, whether I'm their current teacher or they are my previous students, allow that kind of violence to tear a community apart. And so with all due respect to folks who may see safety differently than me, I am doing my best to try to slow our streets down because I don't want that kind of violence to rip through the community here in Pasadena. I've lived through it once, I'm not going to live through it again. And so I share that because I want you to know that I respect debate, I respect different points of view on how we can get things done. But ultimately, the goal always has to be, how do we ensure that this doesn't happen in our community?
And we've gotten used to driving cars. All of us do. I've driven it since I was 16. Learned on a stick shift in the Rose Bowl. I think we forget how difficult it was to introduce automobiles into cities. When automobiles first arrived, they had to compete with horses and wagons and trolleys and pedestrians. There was no such thing as jaywalking. They had to invent that wall to forbid pedestrians from crossing accepted intersections. There was no such thing as car insurance. There was no such thing as traffic lights. The first one was in Chicago. There was no such thing as driver education or driver licenses. Most of our roads weren't paved. We had no interstates. And most streets were cobblestone, if they were paved at all. And so for 30 or 40 years, America went through an extraordinary makeover in order to make it possible for us to drive conveniently and safely and be insured and obey the laws and do all that. That was a 30 or 40 year really wrenching adjustment. And by the way, this is an astonishing figure, but 2 million Americans were moved out of the way of freeways and highways. They lost their homes or their businesses and told, we're widening this road, or we're building a road through your farm or through your neighborhood. 2 million Americans. Now, the country was half the size it is today. That'd be basically, imagine the if we said we're going to install bike lanes throughout America and move 4 million people, there would be quite a stir, I think, about that. But somehow we survived making America safe for cars. And it wasn't really until Ralph Nader and Unsafe at Any Speed that we began to even think about things like seatbelts. I was 5 years old, and somehow my mother, I had left the door of our 55 Ford ajar when I got in. And in those days you had, what were they called? The seats? Bench seats, yes. So I was sitting there at 5 years old, and she turned the corner about 15 miles an hour, and I went sliding out the door. I'm here, fortunately, but I will never forget that experience. But because there were no seatbelts, right? It wasn't until, Ralph Nader that we began to think about making it safe even for drivers, to operate cars. So I know that there's a lot of angst and frustrations because I hear about it from, including some folks in the audience, about why are we spending city money on all these newfangled things? And it's a legitimate debate. But let's remember that the car was a newfangled thing, and we had to make wrenching adjustments in order to make it possible for what we take for granted today. Blair, one more question for you. The Union Street cycleway, because it's two-way, that's what costs $10 million. That's because it's a one-way street, and now you have introduced two-way traffic. We had to put in new traffic signals so that drivers and bicyclists wouldn't crash into each other. It's 1.2 miles, and it doesn't lead to anything. If you want to go from Hill and Union to Royal Parkway and Union, it's perfect. But if you want to get from here to Caltech, it doesn't help you at all. So what are the prospects for a citywide network? And would it be as disruptive and as expensive as the Union Street cycling?
Yeah, the Union Street Cycleway, I think, provides a lot of lessons learned. I'm sure Joaquin could talk about them at length as we all could. Despite the fact that it was too expensive and it is getting more and more well used as time goes on. I do hear from a lot of folks, I never see anyone on the Union Street. We need to start doing some counts, because I was there on Saturday, the same time there was a big rally going on in City Hall. And in 15 minutes, I saw 20 people on that. So it's getting used. It just doesn't, the problem is that it doesn't connect, as Rick was saying, to a network. Why greenways would be dramatically different is because, first of all, in the vast majority of cases, there's no bike lanes on greenways. That's not the point of a greenway, to create a bike lane. The point of a greenway is to create a shared, slower street that's safer for everybody. There may wind up being some bike lanes just in the very wide parts that cross over under the freeway, but for the vast majority of their length, there wouldn't be any bike lanes at all. And in terms of the treatments that Joaquin showed us, a lot of very interesting, kind of innovative things, but fundamentally, probably going to see mostly speed humps and speed cushions. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the newer cushions that are going in have cut throughs for emergency vehicles. So they can kind of roll right over it quickly in a way that a car can't as much. And so that will probably wind up being the most cost-effective treatment and the most frequent treatment, though there may be others as well. So I think it'll wind up being different because it'll create a network. It'll be a lot cheaper, and mostly won't actually be bike lanes.
So Joaquin, let's talk for a minute about greenways. The standard California speed limit for a residential street is 25 miles. Yes. And what does the data show about the speed? You mentioned the speed on Hill Street, in the 40s. And there's a standard in the traffic industry. Those of you who follow this know this. Those of you who don't, it sounds like a complicated algorithm. But in the traffic engineer world, they use a term called the 85th percentile. And that means that 85% of the cars are going slower than that, and 15% are going faster. Why wouldn't you pick up 50%? Well, because it's the 15% that are going really fast that are really the danger. And so if 85% of people are going at that speed or lower, so that's the standard, just as a baseline. But what's the current 85th percentile on these greenway streets that are supposed to be driving 25 miles an hour?
I don't have that in front of me right now, but I will look it up. But even on some of these residential streets where vehicles are routinely traveling at 30 miles an hour, which may feel comfortable as you're driving in a neighborhood, and you're in the vehicle, if you're a pedestrian and you have vehicles on a narrow street driving at 30 miles an hour, it feels a lot faster. And what we found through, all the research is that increment of speed, speed hump will get traffic down to about 15 miles an hour. And it's that 10-mile-an-hour difference, which is really critical in the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists, because we don't have that shell around us. So what may seem as kind of how do I put this, the incremental difference between
25 and 30.
25 and 30 is significant when you're a pedestrian. The other
And not
piece-
just perception, but actual injuries go like this, the faster the traffic is. You can survive getting hit by a car at 15 miles an hour. As it gets faster and faster, your chances of surviving go plummet.
They do, and the other piece that would really affect with physical treatments is those outliers. So even at the 85th percentile speed, where most drivers are driving within that 25 or 30 mile an hour range, you'll have the drivers that are going 45, 50 on that street.
We all know them.
And that's where something like a speed hump or other type of physical treatment greatly reduces that. So our 85th percentile may still be closer to 25, but those outliers is really what we're trying to address with physical engineering improvements to enhance safety.
Until the modern era, basically what we used were traffic cops and stop signs. Of course, traffic signals as well, but for residential streets, Beverly Hills, for example, has a stop sign at every intersection in their residential area. What's wrong with stop signs? What's right with stop signs? Why are we less dependent upon stop signs in the modern era?
Stop signs have a purpose, and it's really to assign the right of way to the motorist or the pedestrian. So you stop at an intersection and then, the next person goes. There's been a number of studies that show adding additional stop signs or too many stop signs in a corridor, if there's not that cross street traffic, really leads to people running the stop signs. We see that in the city now, where we've had stop signs that have been just in place historically, and the number one concern we get is people are running through the stop sign because there's never any cross traffic. And then that leads to enforcement, right? So that's a whole other conversation, but the concern of that is when you have always stop control and people are routinely running the stop sign, as a pedestrian or bicyclist or even a motorist, if you're expecting that vehicle to stop and they don't, that is a bigger issue, because if you're at a location where it's stop controlled on the side street but not on the main street, and you're trying to cross, you're more cognizant of the vehicle traffic around you and looking for that gap to cross. Whereas if you assume that the cross traffic will stop and they don't, even going at 30 miles an hour, it becomes a much bigger impact.
Let me just take a minute and talk about enforcement, because that always comes up, and it should. Enforcement is part of keeping our streets safe. There are three problems with enforcement now. None of them are insoluble, but all of them are challenging. The first one is that it's very difficult to recruit police officers these days, and we do not have as many police officers as we have in the budget. We just swore in 16 new police officers, so we're making some progress. But it is difficult to hire as many police officers as retire. So we had as many as 21 police officers assigned to traffic 10, 15 years ago, and when I was on the council the first time. Today we have 7 if they're all healthy. One of them is not, so we have 6. That's 6 over 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? And they only work 40. So that means most of the time there's 1 or 2 traffic cops. And of course, in Pasadena, we have Rose Bowl events and things. They end up doing a lot of overtime because we use them in those events. So there's not a lot of coverage. The second challenge is everyone thinks, well, why don't you just write tickets, right? I mean, you'll make $1 million. When the state got in trouble 30 years ago financially, it shifted the amount of money when we write a ticket, when one of our officers writes a moving violation, 94% of the revenue goes to the state to operate our courts. 6% comes to the city. So you have to write a lot of tickets to make up for the amount of money that it costs to keep an officer out there. And the final challenge is, and this may not seem like a challenge, but it turns out to be a thorny one. Whenever we initiate what's it called, specific enforcement or targeted enforcement, when people say, you know, we're fed up, we want some cops out here, we try to do that. And what do we find? 80% of the tickets go to the neighbors, who were the ones who were complaining in the first place, because we're used to it, right? Think about it. Some of you are very careful drivers, but many people, you've gone through this corner 1,700 times and you've never seen a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And so you run the stop sign, or you roll the stop sign, or you're in a hurry, you've got an appointment, and suddenly you're going 45 miles an hour down your own street. And so we can't have a police officer out on the corner every single day. And if it's our own neighbors who are causing a good part of the problem, we just, even if we had 100 traffic officers, it would be hard to make a dent in that. It is important. I personally would like to see more traffic enforcement at budget time. I'll be pushing for that. And I welcome your support in that. But that is not a magic answer to the challenge of speed and danger. So let's come back again to the greenways. You're a traffic engineer and you're hiring for $1 million firm over the course of a whole year. It's going to try to help the community decide what makes sense. How do you balance someone who's never been to school to study these things, but just has a gut sense of, I hate traffic circles or I love speed bumps? How do we educate the public so they can make informed choices, not propagandize them, not tell them what they should want, but give people enough information so that we actually end up with good designs and not just a camel designed by a committee?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A lot of it is based on data. What we try to do is put data out there on the effectiveness of devices. From other studies, a lot of these treatments have crash reduction factors. So this is a factor that is developed by agencies throughout the country that do studies and run tests. A lot of universities have programs where they test different devices and actual before-after studies for implementation. And it gives us a good set of values. But we also look at what's worked in the past in the city and what hasn't. And I think part of kind of that gut feel is important because as residents, as business owners, as people that you're walking up and down the street, you're driving to and from your home or your business, you know what feels safe and what doesn't. And it's those it's that feedback that we also need to really help build a safer system. So it's important to have that gut feel.
And Becky and Blair, what's the most constructive way for people who are skeptical or people who are fervently in favor of these kind of devices? How should they approach the going to meetings and participating in the process?
If I can encourage anything, it is whether you are excited for a project or very adamantly against a project, be kind. That is, I think, the first way to approach this. Kindness will unlock a lot of doors for you. And I think create a more thoughtful discussion for our leaders. If you've never been to a city council meeting, if you've never written Rick, if he is your representative or anyone in your lineup of people at a state or local level. And maybe you're nervous to go to a city council meeting, sending an email saying, hey, I really support this project. I don't know all the answers, but I know that I want slower streets. One email can go a long way. And as you continue to build that muscle of saying things that you'd like to see and how you'd like to improve your community, I think it will just become more natural to then continue to build your own advocacy for your neighborhood.
Any additional thoughts, Bert?
Yeah, I think, keep it, thanks, Becky, I like those, keeping an open mind about what may or may not, be effective. Understanding that we can present, like, there may be a solution to a problem that you're looking at that you haven't thought of, and so, yeah, just sort of being open-minded. And the one thing I did want to mention is that, we have kind of two different kinds of programs, Dina. One is called our Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, and that is where the neighbors on a very specific segment, and only the neighbors on that segment, get together and try to make some decisions about how to address traffic issues right in their immediate vicinity. The greenways are not that. The greenways are going to affect the folks who are along the greenways and nearby, but they're also going to be used by folks who are all over the city, who are going from work to school or home to the grocery store. And so we do need to take into consideration folks who are going to be potential users of this, as well as folks who live along the greenway. Thanks.
Yeah. Joaquin?
Yeah, if I could add one more thing, is just don't be afraid to ask questions. I feel like I get emails, both in favor and opposing projects, where people either have a misunderstanding of the project or just have a gut kind of reaction. I think we're at a time that there's very divisive views on things. And so ask questions. Feel free to reach out to staff and say, what really is this project? If you can't find information on our website, call us, email us. We'll get you the information so that you can make that informed decision. It may not change your mind, but at least you have the full picture when you're looking at the project.
So we're going to hear from you. Only one rule, aside from the advice of Be Kind. And that is, if you want to make a statement, you don't have to, pretend you're asking a question. If you want to make a statement, that's fine. But don't make it long, right? Because, we'd like to hear from a number of folks. And if you have a question, of course, we're all here to answer questions. Who'd like to start? Oh, we're in good shape here. Go ahead.
I have two questions. One is to better understand how the transportation department works. Can you tell us the story as to how the new traffic light at Orange Grove and Craig came about? That's my first question. And the second question is, to the extent that you have any impact at all on Caltrans, I've kind of come to the conclusion that they made a major mistake in the transition road between the westbound 210 around Lake and the northern section of that. And it narrows down to 2 lanes. And it just seems to me they made a terrible, terrible mistake when they did that. The traffic is usually very, very congested in the morning in particular. I'm just wondering how much impact, if any, does the city of Pasadena have on Caltrans? Those are the two questions.
Joaquin?
And I'll start with the second one, the Caltrans question. As we've discussed that with them in the past about why is it only 2 lanes that goes from the 210 to the 210, basically, as you go through that connector. A lot of it is the freeway design that was in place was built for an interchange that was supposed to have a freeway that connected south. So it's built as kind of this crossing intersection where these connector roads weren't the primary route. It was meant to go 134 to 210 and then 210 to 710. It was meant to be kind of a T crossing. With that said, we have asked them to look at it, and as we're going through the 710 Reconnected Communities project and looking at what's going to happen to the area south of the freeway, the area that was relinquished to the city, we've been talking to them about really the way to improve this whole network, this freeway network, and reduce the likelihood of people getting off the freeway and driving on city streets to get to where they need to go, is to improve that connection. So it's something that's on the radar. It's part of a bigger plan, but it's really part of that next step for that interchange. on the Orange Grove and Craig, there's a lot of history to that. It was a signal that was actually identified as being warranted or met the criteria for signal. I want to say about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. It was going to be installed, and there was a lot of community pushback about the signal being installed. So the project was actually canceled. We went back and worked with the community there and tried some interim treatments, the northbound right turn only movement, things to reduce the likelihood of collisions there. But at the end of the day, the signal was the right approach. We went and did some more outreach, and now we're at the point to.
Did it have a history of accidents? Are you trying to slow down traffic on Orange Grove? What was the reason for it?
A number of reasons. One is the connectivity north-south. Orange Grove has a lot of segments that you can't really cross because there are no signals. That section of Orange Grove is, that you could go a half mile at least without having a crossing point. So as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, as a motorist, you're kind of waiting for that gap to cross there. So that was one of the issues. There were some collisions there. I don't know if they were tied directly to the intersection or more the curve in the road that's there on Orange Grove as you approach Craig. But the signal does allow us to kind of adjust the speed of the vehicles by how we manage the signal timing to allow that platooning to enhance the safety there. So I don't think safety was safety from the standpoint of prior to collisions was the primary factor, but it's one that was considered.
Hi, first of all, I think you have a no-win job. Okay. But I applaud the effort to make our streets safer. So now I have witnessed 3 accidents on Orange Grove right near the intersection of Sierra Bonita, including one this last weekend, and one near miss where I was driving down Orange Grove and the person coming up southbound on Sierra Bonita to Orange Grove didn't stop and just kept going. And I'm pretty sure that's how a couple of the other accidents happened. Are you guys looking at the data, the accident data to say where are these accidents happening? And maybe that's where we should focus some of the, like that intersection from Sierra Bonita onto Orange Grove regularly there seem to be accidents every few months.
We definitely look at the data. We have a couple of studies, the local roadway safety plan, which was conducted about 2 years ago, that looked at citywide collisions. But we work with PD and we look at collisions really on a monthly basis. We look at the last month, we look at the last 6-month trend. And we identify ways to enhance that. The intersection of Orange Grove and Sierra Bonita, I think, is slated for a new traffic signal. So that is an improvement that's there. We're, as part of this Greenways project, we're looking at, at what else can be done along that Sierra Bonita corridor, but that intersection has
Okay.
been improved for safety.
Next thing is a comment. I routinely use the back streets, Sierra Bonita, when Allen or Hill is congested, and occasionally go down to Wilson as well. Never see very many other cars on those streets when I'm on there, maybe one other car. So I would encourage you to look at the actual traffic data as to, is this really worth the city's investment to do something about it, as well as the speeds and other things? Because we walk down there regularly and I don't feel unsafe walking on Villa or Wilson, or even I wouldn't feel unsafe walking on Sierra Bonita. So that's it.
Can I point out, and maybe both of you can correct me, I believe from that traffic data, Wilson and El Molino have been identified as high collision streets for the greenways?
They're definitely greenways. I have to take a look at the data.
I think we had it.
They are safety corridors. Yeah, I have to double check that.
We'll come back to you, Eric, but we need a couple in front here. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the very nice comments from everybody. I think maybe you may know I'm a bicyclist and I ride a lot of miles. I'm gonna make some suggestions, so you're gonna get an email from me with a lot of long stuff, because you don't want me to talk for a long time. I do support a citywide plan, but my question for you, as a transportation chair, is there money for small greenway is big, traffic lights are big. I have in my head, just from being, I'm a pedestrian, I'm also a cyclist, I'm a driver. I drive all over Pennsylvania and ride and walk don't walk all over, but I drive and drive all over. Is there money just for small fixes? And so nothing big like greenways or traffic lights. Is there money to consider small suggestions?
Definitely. One of the things that we do at the transportation department is what we call traffic investigations. So it could be anything from just adding red curb to enhancing the visibility so that as you're crossing the street, it could be adding signage. There's a number of different treatments depending on what the concern is, and we do have budget for that. So it's separate from a capital improvement project. So these
Okay.
bigger projects is what we call our capital improvement program.
Okay,
But we definitely have money for smaller enhancements, and we do them throughout the year.
okay, and I really do support the citywide plan to connect things for cyclists. Maybe in my lifetime we'll get that.
We have a question back and then we'll get to.
I live on Sierra Bonita, so I wanted to address the previous comment. On my block, we have 20 children that live on Sierra Bonita. The speeds on our street are something that every single neighbor I talk to brings up. So if you haven't seen the speeds, it doesn't mean that they're not an issue. But kids riding bikes, kids playing, kids that are still toddlers that are gonna be playing, gonna be riding bikes. We have the opportunity to avoid tragedies now. Otherwise, I don't want to think what will happen.
Great presentation. Two things. We talk about bicycles and everything, and sometimes I don't understand how they pick whether they want to be a car or bike. They roll through the stop signs. They're supposed to stop too. They don't. One thing that I see more being a problem that recently now is the scooters. The scooters that are electric scooters that go up to 40 miles an hour. And they choose to be on the sidewalk or on the street whenever they pick a lane, bro, pick a lane. You gotta either be a scooter or not. And I know that enforcement is a hard thing. I used to live in Santa Barbara and they had problems like this and they didn't have enough enforcement. So when there were bad areas, they put a mannequin with he looked like a cop with a hat and everything with a speed thing. And it helped. And I do think that we could do that in some areas. You never know. You never know, Rick.
Actually, following his comments about scooters, speed kills, but speed differential can be very, dangerous too. You have scooters and e-bikers who are on the street, it's dangerous for them. But then you put them on the sidewalk and now the pedestrians are endangered, put them in bike lanes and they're going way faster than the bikes. So I know Cassie's working on their application plan. I'm trying to figure out how do cities look at e-bikers, and I think this number is only rising. If kids are riding e-bikes, where do they exactly belong in the entire infrastructure?
It reminds me of the carnage that happened when cars were first introduced. I was the city manager of Santa Monica when the first 12 scooters appeared in America in my town. And they quickly multiplied. And Santa Monica during the summer has tourists. And what I found is that people who ride these scooters, the second and third time, generally for their own safety, are reasonably careful. The first time, they're maniacs. And because we had new tourists every day, we had maniacs every day. And it was a nightmare. One of the things we did was we made the companies put a 15-mile-an-hour governor on the scooters. When you buy one yourself that you own, you can get around that. But that really helped because, yes, they were a menace to pedestrians on sidewalks. They were a menace to themselves as well, because if you fall off of one going 40 miles an hour, you're in deep trouble. Pasadena did not allow them during that sort of surge of scooters that were all over the world. We're going to have to grapple with this. I don't have a good answer, and I think we'll have to figure out. Joaquin?
And Becky might have a good response to that last question too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's not scooters, but for the concern of bikes specifically, something that came through the commission and then was voted on by council recently is speed limits, for cyclists, on sidewalks specifically. And so while we recognize that there's a enforcement conversation, and what does that look like? I do want to say that, recently that was passed, on sidewalks.
And also other cities.
Do you mind, handing the mic over?
One thing I want to add is also that, we also get a lot of confusion with e-bikes right now that you may or may not, folks may or may not be aware of, is that e-bikes that are legally considered bicycles, there's three kinds. Two of them can't go faster than 20 miles an hour. And the third kind, the maximum speed is 28. So if you see a bicyclist on an e-bike and they're going 35, 40 miles an hour, that actually is not considered a bike. And that's a big issue right now because with all of the technology that we have and with the electric driven vehicles, whether they're scooters, bikes, what have you, there's a lot of quote unquote e-bikes that are being sold that are considered off-road bikes. They're not actually street legal. And even the police are having a hard time keeping up with it. And I can tell you that there's statewide advocacy groups that are talking about trying to figure out how to deal with this. But the main point is that, yeah, if you see somebody riding a bike, what looks like a bike and they're going 40 miles an hour, understand that that's actually not really a legal bike. And they're not actually supposed to be riding on the street. Or if they are, they're actually supposed to have like a moped license. Got a friend of mine, her son has a bike like that. And he went out and got a moped license and he got certified. And it's funny you mentioned Santa Monica, Rick, because he actually got stopped in Santa Monica with a bunch of other people. And everybody's bike got confiscated, but his, because he's set it up in the legal way. So there's a lot of confusion around that.
Additional questions, comments? Megan, why don't you?
I may not do this right. Okay, yeah, statement and question, I'll make it quick. Statement wise, I keep hearing about, I know I'm tired of hearing about Union Street. I keep hearing how expensive it was, and I think it was around 15 million, something like that.
10.5, I think.
Like, I look at that, and I'm like, wow, we got all this for 10 million bucks, like, for me, that was great, and then I compare it to how much it would take to build that, so say it was just a bike lane only, right? How much would it cost to build that for cars from Hill over to Rodeo? It's a lot more than 15, right? So I don't understand my thought about that's all. And then my second one is for Joaquin. Hi, Joaquin. For everyone here who is fans of the Greenway, my question for you is how can we assist your department? You mentioned, obviously submit requests and questions, but are there other things we can be doing to help your department? I know the city can volunteers. Just wondering what we can do to help your team, resource deprived team with efforts that we want to support.
I think talk to your neighbors. I'll let Joaquin and then others answer, but I think talk to your neighbors and in a respectful way, right? Again, we've been through this war on speed bumps for 40 years, right? 40 years ago, they were called Bogart bumps because Mayor Bogart was a council member and he was the one who introduced them in Southwest Pasadena. And as a council member for 12 years, I went through many of those wars, the bumps on Wilson Avenue, north of Villa. And again, I think this sort of be kind. Let's lower the temperature from if you are skeptical of greenways, you want me to die on my bike. Or if you support greenways, you're some crazed bicycle maniac that nobody should listen to. I think that's the sort of rhetoric we hear at the national level that is so poisonous and so toxic. So I think talk to your neighbors, talk to the ones who love it and encourage them to participate, talk to the ones who hate it and see if you can find some common ground. I think that's really, it's something called democracy. And we've gotten lazy about it. I will tell you, and I don't say this as a complaint, just an observation, because pinch me. No, pinch me. You notice how thick the skin is? That's from 40 years of public life, right? So I don't take it personally, mostly. But we've come to the point where oftentimes people come down to City Hall and it's the only time they've ever been to City Hall. It's the only time they've been angry enough to go down to City Hall. And they go down to City Hall and they say, if you don't vote my way, I'm voting you out. Well, there's a lot more stuff going on, right? And there are other opinions in our community. And us talking to each other is helpful versus just yelling at whoever we elect. That's my thought. Joaquin?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just being involved. So the more that we can get people to meetings to talk about greenways on these corridors, the more we can get that dialogue happening. Because we want to hear from both sides. We want to hear from people that support it. We want to hear from people that are opposed to it. We want to know why. We want to see if we can find a solution that works for everybody. And really, we want to, at the end of the day, enhance safety along the corridors for everybody. So that's what we really want. And then just kind of in follow up to the Union Street piece, I think something that gets lost is the 6 new traffic signals that were added as part of that corridor project. So traffic signals now are about $100,000 to put in. It's very expensive.
Not each one, but there's 4, right? And
per intersection.
yeah, and they've got the wiring and all of that.
So a full intersection now is up to 800,000. Could be down between 6 and 800,000 final by the end of the day. And adding a protected bike facility included 6 new traffic signals on Union and on Holliston. And yes, that adds a significant cost, but it also adds a place where now pedestrians can cross without having to kind of wait for that gap and dodge cars on the street. That was very fast before we put in the Union Street bike lane, and now operates at a more comfortable pace. And it's a one-way street, so you still have that progression on the signals. If you're turning left across the bikeway, you do have to wait longer now. We're adjusting signals so that you don't have to wait as long. But overall, I think the comfort level, the safety level, and the data will show that we're going through that process now, collecting the data and getting counts.
Yes, sir.
We'll show that.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, I was coming out of Champion Cougars the other day in a bicycle. As I was walking out, the front door is right there. And you're there to see something's coming up the street, the station. So I'm really upset with the process of where is the education process that the city is trying to encourage people to do the right thing? In some of those biking situations, I almost got hit the other day over on. We were over, I think, over on Fair Oaks, and one of those bikes just almost hit, and it was going really fast on the side. Of course, I called the PD, and the PD says, "Oh, we'll just be careful, we'll try to send somebody there." I don't know how that works in terms of sending anybody there, if they never see anybody.
Sure.
So, there needs to be more signage maybe for people on the sidewalk. You have signs on the freeway that says $450, you get in the carpool lane and you're not, one, 2 people in the car or whatever. So the thing is, there needs to be something that you guys proactively do, and it'll be more safe for the rest.
Larry, Becky, this comes up a lot. Clearly, we all know reckless drivers in cars, but we also hear complaints about reckless bike behavior. How do we deal with both of those things?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely pains me to hear that folks are acting in a reckless and dangerous manner. I do want to point out that bicyclists tend to get told that they're responsible for all their fellow bicyclists, and drivers are very rarely walking around feeling like they're responsible for educating all of their fellow drivers. So we all need to make sure that we are taking responsibility in terms of how we secure safety for everybody. I think part of it is we might want to look at allowing I question why we're allowing bicycles on the sidewalk. That's just me personally. Like, I'm not sure we should have that at all. But part of the problem is if we're gonna tell bicyclists they have to be in the streets, we have to give them safer streets to ride. And I think it would behoove us if that was eventually the case, but getting there is gonna be a bit of a process.
I would just echo, I would love to not ride on a sidewalk, because I feel like I have no other option. So to me, creating streets that a cyclist, can avoid being on the sidewalk altogether, and then we can kind of create those sidewalk bans, I think is sort of the best pathway forward.
We'll take a couple more questions. We'll take 3 more questions and then we'll wrap up.
Well, first of all, I really, really appreciate this forum. This is really important to me, and I'm glad so many people turned out. I think I'm the classic little old lady from Pasadena in my driving. Because, you know, I, in my earlier career, I lived in San Francisco. I didn't drive forever. And then we spent a lot of time on the Outer Banks in North Carolina. So when I come home, I'm literally driving like 30 miles an hour. You cannot stop laughing at me. But it really matters to me that we have safe streets, and we walk everywhere around our neighborhood. And I see 3 things consistently. Of course, I see all the speakers, right? But I also see, you know, this is a different kind of a problem. I see the cars with no mufflers that just rip through the neighborhoods. And also, this is just a curiosity. Am I crazy? Isn't it illegal to have black windows? So many cars go by, they have no muffler, they have black windows, they're parked around my neighborhood. They're my neighbors. Nobody is dealing with that? That's like a safety issue for everybody. And I do realize it's an enforcement problem, and I appreciate getting that question answered. But, you know, I, for one, would head a committee to support the Pasadena police officers with just parking a car on Hill for the afternoon. If there's nobody there, there's nobody there. But why don't we just park 5 cars around? Or I love that gentleman's idea, right? Come on. I mean, I myself want to go down to the costume shop, get a little police officer uniform. I will use my hairdryer as the gun. And I just want to go stand out on my corner of Hill and Paloma, or Allen and Paloma, which I'm also near, for like half an hour and see what happens. Because there's got to be things that we as citizens can do when that's the way we are with enforcement. Any ideas?
Rick, can I jump in on the muffler piece? So I advocate with a group called Streets for All, and we work in California state legislative to work on street safety bills. And I believe it was 2 years ago, we passed a bill related to noise pollution to make it illegal to do that to your car. Due to some issues with the DMV, there was a delayed implementation, but it will be similar to smog checks. That the only way to get your registration is to like ensure that you don't have a removed muffler. Now, noise police could pull you over for it now, but we've already kind of cleared the enforcement issue. But just know that potentially in a few years, it might, it's working itself out, hopefully.
So I have a question. Basically, we live near a hill on the corner, and there's a couple other streets that I see this on, but I may be walking and I'll see a car swivel around the corner. So the tire may go around it or something like that. And so I don't know, maybe it's just me, but is there like is that an actual issue? And if it is there something we can use to solve it? Or anything?
Yeah, first off, thank you for coming out. I appreciate you speaking up and telling us what we're seeing on the street. There's a couple of things. So there's a new law called daylighting, which really requires everybody to park at least 15 feet from a marked or unmarked crosswalk. So basically 1 car length away from the intersection, even if there is no marked crosswalk. What that does, it provides a little bit more visibility as pedestrians are trying to cross the street. So that is in effect now. What we're doing as a city is we're trying to go through locations where we're seeing issues and painting red curb there so that people are staying away from that area. We're issuing warnings where we can, citations if we need to, but we really wanted to start with just painting the red curb and letting people know that they can't park so close to the intersection. A lot of that is the speed of the drivers. So as people are whipping around a corner, they tend to hug that corner a little bit more. So, you know, it's that driver, it's the education, it's us as drivers ourselves as we're, you know, going around a corner and really, trying to realize who is around us that we're not seeing. It's important just to keep that in mind and as you're making that turn, go a little bit slower. But we do have some engineering treatments as well that
Hey, hello there. Great. So I've been following these issues in some other cities, and I know some other cities have really prioritized creating safe corridors for children to get to school and back, you know, either on the bike paths or as pedestrians. You know, I live by Marshall, and there are not a lot of kids riding their bike or walking to school these days, and there's quite a sea of automobiles out on Casa Grande every day, creating quite the scrum. And, you know, kids deserve to have a chance to be physically fit and to, you know, live the life and getting into school safely. And I'm wondering if what role that is playing in the planning process.
City does have a Safe Routes to School program, so we work closely with the schools to identify kind of the best routes into the school, looking at where different traffic controls are, and various other groups within the city that are kind of volunteer organizations also have been kind of promoting programs like the walking school bus or other programs to help incentivize that active transportation for kids. Every month in May, when it's walk to school, we do some programming with different schools. May, September.
It's September.
September, sorry, it just happened, our walk to school programs. And it is now we're in October, so we have a lot of other events that are really trying to encourage walking, and Pasadena Complete Streets Coalition really does a lot to, you know, through their volunteer efforts to help promote that walkability. So there are some programs in place. Some are coordinated with the city, and others are really kind of grassroots efforts that work with the schools.
So I'll follow up on this real quick because Joaquin's not allowed to say this. We've not always gotten the cooperation from PUSD that we would have liked for Safe Routes to Schools. So now that's not necessarily talking about individual schools, but in general, overall, the administration has not always been as open-minded and supportive about these programs as we would have liked. So if these are important to you, please let your PUSD board member know, please let your local school know, and encourage them to participate. Thank you.
Can I say one more win on this that happened about 2 weeks ago from the state side? AB 382, the governor just signed this, which would allow Pasadena as a city to lower the speed limit from 25 to 20 miles an hour. It would also allow us to change the language to when a child is present to, they can set their own hours. Which is how many other states, if you lived or have lived anywhere else, this is actually very common. I was born in Ohio. This is how Ohio does it. So this will allow us to lower the speed limits in our schools. It's required by 2031, but Pasadena could do it today if they'd like.
I have one statement, and one question. The statement is that, like on Green Street, where they have the parking in the middle of the street, I don't know. And there's not very many handicap parks like at Green and Madison. If I park there, it's hard to get across the bike lane safely, and then there's no cutout. So where am I supposed to walk if I park there? And that's not necessarily a question, but a statement that I find it difficult. And then the statement is, oh no, this is a question. I need to be educated, like on Marengo at Pico, where the bike lane turns to Stripe. Is that the only place you can pull over to make a right turn, is once you approach the Stripe part?
Yeah, two great questions. First, on the Union Street location that you're talking about, accessible parking. As part of that project, we actually added a number of blue curb spaces on the cross streets to make sure that we had that accessible parking up against the curb. But also at those locations, we've added loading zones at the intersection so that the very first space or last space of the block, you'll see it's posted as a loading zone, and that is to allow that access to the curb ramp so that you can get to the corner there. So those spaces are usually available. The second question was with respect to, yeah, the green striping. So when we have green striping in bike lanes, we have broken it up and it's called the conflict zone. And that conflict zone is really so that motorists are aware that there may be a bike in that facility and bicyclists are aware that vehicles may be crossing over. So that's the best place to cross when you're going into like a right turn pocket or trying to turn. But you can turn across a bike lane if you're going into a driveway or anything else, even without that conflict zone.
We had a question online, and since we have a number of folks listening online, I think we should honor one. It will not come as a surprise. It's from Mr. Caballero. He asks about the signs that say your speed when you see, you know, it says you're going 74 miles an hour. We've seen some of that data. You've expressed that some of that data is not necessarily 100% accurate. He's asking for some of this data. Why are we not routinely collecting that data?
So we have over 50, maybe close to 60 signs now within the city that provide the speed as you're driving by. Those called speed feedback signs. And really the purpose of the signs is as you're driving and you see how fast you're going, for the motorists that may be speeding and really just aren't paying attention to how fast they're going, it helps slow them down to provide that kind of feedback that, oh, it's a 35, but you're really going 42, 45. So that's the intent of the speed feedback signs. They collect data, but it's a lot of ping data of actual speeds that can kind of jump around. So not all of the data, as we found, as we try to compare it against other actual speed counts, has been very accurate. So we've stopped routinely collecting that data because at 55 signs, having somebody go to each sign and pull the data off of the sign, and it stores about 3 weeks of data, is just something that we found wasn't efficient because there's other ways for us to take a look at that. And if we have a concern about a corridor, then we can look at the data. But if it's just kind of speed citywide, we're not using that data because we found it to be inaccurate for that type of speed study. So to kind of answer the end of your question, since it's not data that we routinely use in the course of business that we actually download and keep, it's not data that's subject to Public Records Act request because we haven't stored it in any way.
So about a minute to just close out, have final thoughts, and then I'll have one final thought, and we will stay around. For those of you, there's 4 or 5 people that didn't get their questions answered. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Claire.
I'm sorry that Keep Pasadena Moving wasn't here. It is helpful to hear from different perspective. You had asked what questions would they be asking if they were here, and what I wanted to mention is people get concerned when we talk about these kinds of safety improvements, that it's gonna take them too long to get where they're going. They're gonna get stuck in multiple light cycles. And I just want to say that where the idea is to be able to move traffic safely through the city and yet also have everybody be able to get safely to where they're going. That's the ultimate goal. And so just want to assure people that when we're looking at these kinds of safety improvements, we're also looking at making sure that Pasadena remains safe and livable for everybody.
I'll try to make this brief. On our bike panel, Rick asked us a few months ago, well, we're not like Amsterdam, we're not like Europe. So how are we supposed to move forward with these? And I pulled together 3 cities in the US that I just want to share some things that they're doing that I think are really cool, and I'd be happy to chat about it later if you're nerdy. First is Carmel, Indiana. Carmel, Indiana has a population of about 30,000 less than us. Any guess on how many roundabouts they have in Carmel, Indiana? 150 roundabouts in Carmel, Indiana, smaller population than us in Pasadena, but doing big things. Traffic crashes have gone down 80s injury in those roundabouts, down 87% for injury. And so virtually wiped out a lot of their injury for crashes overnight because of those roundabouts. Fremont, California, they put in red light cameras, speed bumps, and turn restrictions, and saw a reduction in 2021 of 45% crash reduction. Lastly, Madison, Wisconsin, they launched as a neighborhood, as a committee, 20 It's Plenty. It was a campaign to reduce speeds across their residential streets. It was so successful that they rolled it out across the city and they saw a reduction between 40 and 45% in 2024. So these small cities that are maybe similar to us, maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, they're doing things together to create safer communities. And so we could be on this list too, and that makes me really excited.
For me, I think it's really, we talk a lot about safety and establishing goals, and within Pasadena, we have between 2 and 6 fatalities a year, and that's too many. We, as staff, and we are recommending to City Council, as part of our local roadway safety action plan, to set a goal of 0 fatalities in the city by 2035. It's important for us because it's not just the Department of Transportation, it's all the departments in the city. It's PD, and when I looked at the safe system approach and we talked about that, it's being able to collaborate within disciplines, within different departments. It has to do with emergency response. It has to do with how we educate people. So libraries, parks, how we get information out, and really things that we're already doing, but establishing that goal so that it's something that that we're doing in our everyday roles as engineers, planners, everything from customer service reps to different departments and different divisions. So we are serious about safety. We really want to get that number down to 0. We think we can. There are a number of other factors that are out of our control, DUIs, we talked about enforcement, younger drivers and decisions they make. We had, serious fatality where 4 people died in a collision because of just poor decisions. So it's something that we take to heart, and we just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we're really pushing to get there, and we want hopefully to get that council support with that.
Let me close with this thought, and bear with me for a moment. My dad was a jazz fan, and one of the songs that he used to play was by Jimmy Lunsford, one of the great big bands. And they had a song called "It Ain't What You Do, It's the Way How You Do It." I personally, based upon my life experience of having gone to graduate school in New York City, where they have a great transit system, having grown up here in Pasadena and gotten a red Schwinn bike on my 7th birthday and ridden to school, until I got to Blair. I personally would love to see a city where we could get around without cars. I would like to see a city where moms could feel safe getting on a bike with their kids and going to the park. I believe in that deeply. I also know this history of how long it took to sort of domesticate the car. This is going to be a very long and complicated process to rebalance our streets so that they're safe for everyone. It's not an easy one democratically, it's not an easy one financially, it's not even an easy one from an engineering standpoint. But I think that's the goal. But I have a responsibility to represent all of you, not just those who voted for me or those who voted against me, but especially those who didn't even bother to vote because they didn't think that elections mattered. I represent all of you. And so I take seriously this process. This is why we have these endeavors, is so that you begin to feel that your voice is heard and that other people are also encouraged to maybe take this democracy seriously. We're coming up on our 250th anniversary as a country, and it was a huge experiment to believe in this idea of self-government. And, I said I was making a point at council meeting the other day about public outreach. And I reminded my colleagues that the 8 of us are not the bosses of the city. You are. We work for you. We have a responsibility on our conscience to do what we think is right, because you elected us. But what's right is not always clear, and so your voices matter. So I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I want you to encourage your neighbors to participate, and I hope that this process of figuring out the greenways will be a positive process. And one that at the end of the day, people won't necessarily get every single thing they wanted, but they'll say that was a good process, and I'm glad we did it. And I'm glad that we got through it and we have a safer city as a result. I also I do this every time because someone said, it's a no-win job. We have Jennifer and Joaquin from our DOT. Do you have anyone else? But these folks, this is, they have an 8 to 5 job, and then 3 or 4 nights a week, because I'm only one of 8. They're out at community meetings with council members, with the mayor, sometimes without any of us, and they take a lot of heat. I really, really appreciate them. I don't, by the way, always agree with them, as they know, but I really deeply appreciate and respect them. They're incredible professionals, and I would just like to ask you to share in thanking them for doing this. All right, let's keep it around for any feedback, any questions, any comments, any suggestions.
Yeah, no, I can believe you.